Hey everyone, welcome. Today, we're going to unpack the incredible science of how a human life unfolds, from the very beginning to the very end. We're going to explore the frameworks that help us make sense of that journey, from the psychological drivers inside of us to the massive social forces that shape our path.
So let's just start with a huge question, right? Is our life a set of predictable, neat little steps, or is it something way more complex? A dynamic story shaped by countless forces, both things we see and things we don't. People have been trying to answer this for a long time, and how those answers have changed, well, that's a fascinating story in itself.
So, to get our heads around that question, we're going to walk through 6 key areas. Each one is going to add another layer to our understanding. We'll start big picture, then we'll zoom into the psychology and the sociology that shapes us. We'll even look at what drives us, how our life story gets written into our actual biology, and then at the very end, we'll bring it all together.
Okay, let's dive right in. First things first, why is it so important to study the entire life course? I mean, why not just focus on childhood or adulthood or old age as totally separate things?
Well, the core idea here is that we are never finished developing. Life isn't a race with a finish line. It's this continuous process of becoming. Our path is constantly being shaped by this really intricate dance between our biology, our own psychology, and the world that's always changing around us. Okay, so let's look at how our understanding of that journey has really evolved. The early theories were pretty rigid, but they've given way to a much more fluid and, frankly, more realistic way of looking at things. The old way of thinking, the life stage perspective, it saw life kind of like a simple staircase. You finish the childhood step, you move up to the adulthood step, and that's it, you're done. But now we see it as a much more dynamic, lifelong journey. The modern lifespan perspective gets that development doesn't just stop when you turn 21. We are constantly adapting and learning and changing through our entire lives. A psychologist named Paul Baltez really broke this down into some core ideas. He showed us that development is lifelong, and it's multidirectional, which means you can be gaining wisdom at the exact same time you're losing, say, some physical speed. It's a constant trade-off of gains and losses. And maybe most importantly, we always have plasticity. That's our capacity for change, which is shaped by our biology, the historical moment we live in, and of course, our own choices.
But here's the thing, right? A person doesn't just develop in a bubble. Psychology gives us the individual engine, but sociology, that gives us the map and the terrain we're driving on. And this brings us to our next big idea, the sociological view. Let's make this feel a bit more real. We can use sociologist Glenn Elder's life course perspective and follow a life. Let's call them Alex. First, historical time matters a ton. Being born in 1985 is a totally different experience than being born in 2005. Second, the timing of transitions is key. Alex graduating right into a recession? That is a huge impact. Third, our lives are linked. Our choices are always tied to our family and friends. And finally, we have human agency. We make choices, for sure, but we make them within the opportunities and the constraints that society gives us.
So you might be wondering, how on earth do you visualize all of these interacting forces at the same time? Well, that's where the Life Course Cube comes in. It's a really brilliant tool for exactly this. It helps organize all the different dimensions that shape a life. So the first axis is all about time. But it's not just one kind of time. There's your individual age, there's the historical period you're living through, and then there's your cohort or the generation you belong to. And each one has a different kind of influence on you. Next up, Axis 2, life domains. This one's super important because it reminds us that our lives aren't just one single story. They unfold across multiple areas at the same time. What happens in your work life is absolutely going to affect your family life, which in turn can affect your health. They're all connected. And finally, the third axis gets into the levels of analysis. This is where we can kind of zoom in and zoom out. The inner individual level is our biology and psychology. The individual level is our actual behavior and choices we make. And the supra-individual level is the bigger world, our relationships, social institutions, and culture. And this is where the power of the cube really becomes clear. It shows us all those interdependencies. We can look at a single event, like Alex deciding to change careers at 35, and see it through all these dimensions at once. We can see how their age, their family needs, their personal drive, and the job market all come together at that one single point. Okay, so this brings up a really crucial question. We have the individual, and we have the context. But what's the fuel? What actually drives us to act,
to chase after goals, and to navigate this whole complex landscape throughout our lives. A researcher named Judah Heckhausen proposed this constant dance between two types of control. Primary control is when we try to change the world to meet our goals, studying for a test or applying for that new job. Secondary control is when we change ourselves to adapt to the world, like managing our disappointment or adjusting our goals when we face reality. And we absolutely need both to thrive. So our motivation tends to follow this cycle. First, we optimize. We choose which goals are most important. Then we engage, using that primary control to go after them. If we hit a wall, we compensate. We find another way. And finally, and this is so critical, we have to be able to disengage. We have to use that secondary control to let go of goals that just aren't possible anymore and pivot to new ones. This ability becomes really, really important as we face life's different developmental deadlines. All right, now we get to our final and maybe the most fascinating piece of the puzzle. We've talked about the mind and society, but how do all these life experiences, the stress, the joy, the social connections, how do they actually get inside our bodies and shape our physical health? This whole section is built around this incredibly powerful idea of how experience gets under the skin. This refers to something called biological embedding, the idea that our life story, our biography, doesn't just happen to us, it literally becomes a part of our biology. And this isn't just a metaphor, it happens through very real mechanisms. Think of allostatic load as the cumulative wear and tear on your body from chronic stress, kind of like a car engine that's been running too hard for way too long. And then there's epigenetics, which is just mind-blowing. It's a process where our experiences can leave chemical marks on our DNA that actually change how our genes are expressed, without changing the genes themselves. It's like someone's adding sticky notes to your cookbook that change how you read the recipes. To explain this super intricate relationship between our life experience and our physical health, researchers created a big framework called Life Course Health Development, and it's built on 7 core principles. These principles really bring it all together. First, they say health and development aren't two separate things. They're one single, continuous, unfolding process. And this process is complex. It emerges from the interplay of everything from our genes to our neighborhoods. Timing is critical. When something happens in our life can be just as important as what happens. But our bodies have plasticity. They're built to adapt. And the goal isn't just surviving, it's thriving. And that requires harmony, a real balance across all these different systems, from our molecules all the way up to our culture. So let's pull the camera back one last time and see how this complete, high-resolution picture comes together, fitting all these theories into one coherent whole. You see, each theory we've talked about provides a vital piece of the puzzle. Psychology gives us the individual engine of change. Sociology provides the map and the social context we're navigating. Motivational theory explains the fuel that drives us, and the biosocial approach shows how that entire journey gets physically embedded in our bodies. Seeing it this way is absolutely crucial for everything from public health policy to individual therapy, because it shows that to really help a person, you have to understand their whole story. Ultimately, understanding these theories isn't just an academic exercise. It gives us a powerful new lens for understanding ourselves. It prompts us to ask, what historical forces have shaped my path? What key transitions defined my journey? And how has my own story gotten under my skin? It's a pretty profound way to look at the arc of a human life.